They say your home is your sanctuary. But what happens when the people who claim to protect your neighborhood decide you don't belong there anymore? One morning I woke up to bright orange notices nailed to my fence, my gate padlocked, and a sign in my yard that said, "Foreclosed by Birchwood Estates." For the first 3 years after moving into Willow Creek Estates, I thought I'd finally found peace. The streets were lined with identical maple trees, every lawn trimmed to perfection, and the smell of freshly cut grass always drifted through the air on Sunday mornings. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe, quiet, and predictable, the kind of neighborhood where porch lights clicked on at the same time each night, and everyone waved without ever actually talking. I bought my house after 10 years of construction work and saving every spare dollar. It wasn't just a property. It was proof that hard work could build something permanent. I loved waking up early, brewing my coffee, and watching the sunrise reflect off my freshly painted fence. The mailbox I'd installed myself stood proudly at the curb, matte black, modern, clean. It was mine, every inch of it. The HOA newsletter arrived like clockwork each month, a cheerful sheet of pastel paper filled with announcements about community bake sales, approved mulch colors, and friendly reminders about trash bin placement. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Rules were rules, and I figured if you just stayed out of trouble,
they'd leave you alone. But that was before I met her. Clarissa Pennington, HOA president,
self-appointed guardian of the community's aesthetic integrity. The kind of person who measured power by how many neighbors she could scold in a single afternoon. You could always tell when she was on patrol. Her heels clicked across driveways like a metronome of control. She'd smile, wave, and then send an email about your non-compliant hedge height before sunset. The first notice I received was small. It started with the mailbox, that small, ridiculous detail that no sane person should lose sleep over. But in Willow Creek Estates, even paint gloss could ignite a war. After the second fine, I decided to fight back the right way. I wrote a calm, factual email to the HOA board, attaching photos, receipts, and a copy of the community guidelines that clearly stated, black or dark-toned mail receptacles permitted. I hit send and waited. 2 days later, I got their reply. Your concerns have been noted. However, decisions made by the board are final. That single sentence felt like a door slamming shut. Within weeks, the notices multiplied. I received one for excessive vegetation, referring to the rosemary bush I used for cooking. Another for inadequate lighting, even though my porch bulb had been replaced just the week before. Then came vehicular blight. Apparently, my work truck, the same one that built half the decks in this neighborhood, didn't fit their aesthetic standards. It was laughable at first, until it wasn't. One morning, I woke to find a bright orange paper nailed to my fence. HOA enforcement notice, property review pending. It was signed by none other than Clarissa Pennington herself. I pulled the paper off and crumpled it in my hand, but that didn't change the uneasy feeling that settled in my gut. Something about this felt coordinated, deliberate. Clarissa's emails became more frequent, each one more aggressive than the last. She CC'd the entire HOA board as if to make an example out of me. The messages were filled with polite threats cloaked in bureaucratic language. Failure to comply may result in further action. Your cooperation will reflect positively on your homeowner record. Still, I kept my cool. I paid my dues on time, trimmed the lawn weekly, and tried to ignore the way her car seemed to appear near my driveway at odd hours. Sometimes parked, sometimes just idling. But then, one Friday evening, I came home from a long day's work to find something that made my stomach twist. A bright red lockbox was attached to my front door, and in my yard, a white sign staked into the ground read, "For sale, Pennington Realty Group." At first, I thought it was a prank. I laughed out loud, shook my head, and pulled the sign out of the ground. But when I tried to unlock my door, my key wouldn't fit. Someone had changed the locks. I stood there for a moment, the cool evening air pressing against my chest, the world suddenly too quiet. Then, slowly, I walked around to the back door, and that's when the smell of freshly baked cookies hit me. Inside my kitchen, lights were on. Voices echoed faintly. I peered through the window and saw people, strangers, walking through my house. A woman in heels pointed at my countertops, talking animatedly to a couple beside her. My furniture was still there, but rearranged. My grandmother's quilt was gone, replaced by a beige throw. The framed photos on my wall had been flipped face down. I wasn't dreaming. I was being erased. I went straight to the HOA office the next morning. Clarissa was there, sipping coffee behind her desk like nothing was wrong. When I demanded to know why my house was listed for sale, she smiled, a slow, patronizing curve of the lips. "Mr. Whitaker," she said sweetly, "the association has foreclosed due to unpaid fees and repeated non-compliance." "You were notified." "I've never missed a payment," I said, placing a folder of receipts on her desk. She didn't even look at them. "The board's decision is final." By the time I left that office, I could feel my pulse in my throat. The neighbors were watching me from their driveways, whispering behind clipped smiles. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Sandra, the woman across the street. "Sandra, are you moving? Just saw your listing online. It says, owner relocated suddenly." I opened the link, and there it was. My home, staged like a stranger's, photoshopped to perfection. Even my black mailbox had been digitally replaced with a white one. That's when I stopped trying to reason. I called the county clerk. No foreclosure had been filed. The property was still legally mine, which meant Clarissa had orchestrated everything. The lockbox, the listing, the staging, without a single legal document to back it up. But how do you prove something like that when the whole board is in her pocket? Over the next week, I began to document everything. Every notice, every email, every photograph. I even installed a security camera under my eaves, hidden from view, and that's when I caught her. It was 2:13 a.m. on a Wednesday. The footage showed a figure in a light-colored trench coat walking up my driveway. She carried a clipboard and a flashlight. She paused, looked around, and snapped photos of my truck, my door, my garden, like she was building a case. The next morning, another violation letter appeared. Unauthorized modifications to landscape design. The rosemary bush again. It would have been almost funny if it weren't so sinister. The morning it all came to a head was unnervingly calm, one of those blue sky days where the quiet feels staged, like the world is holding its breath before something breaks. By then, I'd collected weeks of evidence. Every violation notice, every anonymous letter, every staged photo, every second of nighttime footage. My lawyer had filed formal complaints with the County Housing Board, the State Real Estate Commission, even the local news station. Still, Clarissa hadn't flinched. If anything, she'd doubled down. That week, I received a letter marked Final Enforcement Action. The HOA was moving forward with removal of personal property from abandoned premises. It was signed and dated by Clarissa herself. Abandoned. My lights were on. My truck was parked in the driveway. My mail was being collected daily. There was nothing abandoned about my home. That's when I realized she wasn't acting out of authority anymore. She was acting out of obsession. The following morning, I drove home from a supply run to find a moving truck idling in front of my house. Two men in matching shirts were carrying boxes out my front door. My boxes. My things. I slammed the truck into park so hard the tires squealed. "Hey!" I shouted, jumping out. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The men froze. One of them stammered, "We were told the property was foreclosed. We're with Pennington Realty Group." And there she was, Clarissa Pennington, standing on my porch in a cream blazer and sunglasses, clipboard in hand like a general surveying her victory. She looked at me like I was an intruder. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, her voice calm, almost pitying. "You can't be here. This property is under HOA possession pending sale." "HOA possession?" I said, laughing, incredulous. "You don't own anything here." "This is my house." Neighbors had begun to gather across the street, their curiosity piqued by the shouting. Curtains shifted. Phones were out. Clarissa adjusted her blazer, the faintest smile on her lips. "This isn't the way to handle things," she said softly. "You could have avoided all this if you just followed the rules." Rules. That single word sent a hot surge of anger through me. Following the rules. I said, "You've violated more laws than I can count, and you're still standing on my porch telling me about rules?" That's when I heard the sound, the unmistakable click of a police radio. A patrol car had pulled up beside the curb. Two officers stepped out, hands resting casually near their belts. Clarissa waved them over like she'd been expecting them. "Officers," she said sweetly, "thank goodness you're here." "This man is trespassing." The words hit me like a punch. Trespassing in my own home. The officer glanced between us. "Sir, can we see some identification?" I handed over my ID, my voice steady but tight. "This is my residence. Check the property records." "My name's on the deed." Clarissa crossed her arms. "That deed is being contested. The HOA has already filed the foreclosure." The officer nodded slowly. "Ma'am, do you have any documentation to support that?" She pulled out a stack of papers, thick and neatly stapled, all bearing HOA letterheads. And that's when I played my card. I reached into my truck and pulled out a black binder, printouts, time-stamped photos, emails from county officials, security footage, every fraudulent move she had made, documented. I handed it to the officer. "You might want to read that before anyone makes a mistake." They stepped aside to look. Clarissa's confidence faltered, just slightly. Then a voice from behind the crowd. "Channel 7 News. Are you Clarissa Pennington?" A reporter and cameraman were crossing the street, microphones ready, eyes locked on her. My lawyer had tipped them off. The crowd gasped. Phones were raised. Clarissa froze. That night, the story aired locally. Within weeks, county officials had launched an investigation. Clarissa resigned. Her license was suspended. The HOA board dissolved, and for the first time in years, peace returned. Weeks later, the cul-de-sac had changed. Polite whispers became conversations. Neighbors smiled without caution. The HOA newsletter stopped. The website disappeared. New bylaws were written with transparency. My house, still mine. The mailbox still matte black. The rosemary bush spilling onto the walkway. Proof that peace isn't granted. It's defended. The story spread online. Messages poured in from people who had faced similar harassment. This wasn't just my story. It was a warning, a blueprint for standing up against those who abuse authority. I kept renovating, kept building, kept living. Every time I walked past the mailbox, I remembered what it felt like to almost lose what you love, and what it feels like to take it back. The lesson was simple. Control only works as long as you stay quiet. Speak up, fight, protect your space. Because a home isn't just wood and nails. It's your life, your work, your sanctuary. And anyone who tries to take it will eventually learn what happens when you refuse to back down.